last week, the topics of the global top 3 were 4 loot and 8 loot, the maps pool, and PvP 5v5. So today I will be covering all of these, and then we will cover some other stuff that is coming. But first, let's dive into that. Let's start by 4 loot and 8 loot. Okay. So this is basically players asking Ankama what's the reason why some content is designed for 4 players and what's the reason why some content is designed for 8 players, and is there a possibility of more than that? So let's see what they have to answer to that. Many of you are wondering about the direction taken by the teams regarding the format of combats. Some regret needing to cut their team in two to fully enjoy the contents optimized for 4 characters, while some hope that future additions will allow to maybe one day surpass the limit of 8 characters per combat. Hello, Jay. A natural evolution towards the 4-player format. The current trends in Dofus show a progressive sliding towards 4 characters gameplay. This choice did not appear at random, but results from various observations. The first concerns the very nature of the game based on a turn-by-turn system. The more entities there are in a fight, players or summons, the longer and potentially frustrating turns can get. To lighten this feeling, many improvements were deployed over time. Reduction of the length of turns, speeding up the animations, possibility to chain multiple spells without waiting for the end of the visual effects. Despite those efforts, above a certain threshold, the mechanical weight becomes difficult to avoid. That is true when you play with 8 people in the fight, especially if you play only one character or a small number of characters. You have to wait a long time before your turn comes up. Hey, Whirlies. I understand that frustration. Sometimes, like, people do something else at the same time. They scroll through TikTok, or they watch a video, or they even play another game while they wait for their turn. Okay, then the introduction of modular dungeon largely contributed in making the 4 format a new norm. It became easier to build a group, including in a context where recruiting remains a point of friction. That's true, particularly on single account servers. So I think in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, but dungeon groups were always of 8. And so however how many people there were in the fight, you were always fighting the same challenge. Now, if you're less than 4, you fight 4 monsters, and if you're more, then it adjusts to your group, and I think that's what they mean here. Moreover, we have often brought up the creation of small adds functionality to answer this problem. Yeah, now they're talking about kind of group finder here. If it didn't yet find its way to our production calendar, it remains planned. Okay, so they're confirming that Petites annonces that's like Craigslist or something like that. With like, hey, I'm looking for someone to do the Kutan fight, and then people can comment on them, and then you can organize while staying in game without having to go on a Discord or something like that. I can't imagine trying to find 7 other players on Draco. Yeah. Especially on Draco, since now everyone playing Mono kind of deserted that server to go play on the new servers. But yeah. A more legible format. It's important to remind ourselves that a dungeon completed with 8 players is not necessarily more difficult than one with 4 players. Often it's the opposite. Past 4 characters, the system simply adds more monsters to balance the combat. But this doesn't suffice in making it more complex or dangerous. In a turn-based system, a good strategy combined with a good character hit strength frequently allows to get rid of the enemies before they can even play. Moreover, pushing back the maximum limit of combat participants would have a non-negligible impact on the game's economy by mechanically increasing the generation of resources, which we want to avoid. It's therefore logical that these last few years we focused the more demanding contents on the 4 characters format. This configuration allows us to fine-tune the combats and offer a more balanced experience without penalizing smaller groups. So in my eyes, personally, I feel like people who play 8 loot team, most of the time they do it to have 8 characters to drop stuff. So they want to farm and they want to multiply the loot that they get by 8. Personally, I think that playing more than 4 characters doesn't create incredible combos that wouldn't be accessible normally if you only play 4. With 4 characters, you can have like a very complete team. You can try a lot of different combinations, and you don't really benefit from, like, if you add one more to your 4-man team, you don't see like a really good combo taking place. It usually you usually are able to do these combos with only 4. So I think it's fine that they're going more towards the 4-player. I think if you play 4 characters and you have another friend that plays 4 characters, it's nice to be able to run dungeons together as 8. But other than that, I don't really see that much value of having like 8 people group. Right. MMORPG remains a collective game. Dofus remains an MMORPG, and group game remains part of its DNA. Classical dungeons keep their 8 characters format, and we don't plan to question this. With that being said, we also don't plan on raising this limitation, since this risks excessively increasing the duration of combats. However, we are thinking of new game mode that will allow to simulate large-scale confrontations, including more than 8 players. This format, imagined for guilds, could welcome large-scale cooperation mechanics while avoiding the usual recruiting constraints. It's an approach that we want to explore, since it seems more promising than the extending of classical combats. This is intriguing. I'm curious to see. I can't imagine what it would look like, but I'm really curious to see what they have in mind. 4 is the sweet spot anyway. 2 lots of 2, 1 lot of 4, 4 lots of 1. These all seem pretty achievable in all servers. Yeah, that's true. And I guess like people who play bigger groups don't do it in the goal of playing with others. So they're not limited. Say, like, I don't think having one person play a character and being sad that he can't play a dungeon with his other friend that also has a character as a like 16-person group, I don't think this is like really a thing that's happening. Okay. In conclusion, the 8 players mode is not abandoned and remains fully accessible in classical contents, but when we seek to offer more tactical and demanding combats, it's the 4-player modes that we favor for reasons of rhythm, balancing, and game comfort. I think that makes perfect sense. I think it's easier to balance. Like, if you balance a dungeon, it can't be as easy with 8 as it is with 4. Or as hard. So if you want to have like a specific level of difficulty, if you limit the number of characters to 4, for instance, I think temporal anomalies, like when there's an anomaly which increases the loot you get on an area, you can go into the zap and fight like a special boss. And these fights are designed for 4 players and exactly 4 players. So having a fixed number of players is better to balance the challenge. And 4 seems to be the best number. I'll take my 4 charges with your 4 and then we can run it again. Yeah, if you want to, if you have 2 friends with both each with each having 8 characters, then you can do 2 runs of 8. But I don't think it's really. If you play 8 characters, you don't want to play with anyone else. You want to play like a solo game. We don't plan on increasing the limit of participants per combat in order to preserve the fluidity and the integrity of the economic system. However, we are working on a new type of content imagined to gather more players in new combats on the guild scale, a larger format but better adapted to today's gameplay realities. Okay, I think this is pretty reasonable. I don't think a lot of people will disagree with that. 4 seems to be the sweet spot. I think in not Waven, but Wakfu, the hero mode allows you to play 3 characters, so most of the content is designed for 3 or 6, a bit like Dofus with 4 or 8. I haven't played enough to have like an opinion on that, but it seems like 3 or 4 character seems to be the sweet spot for one person to play in multi-account, and then having twice that allows for 2 people to play together. Okay, let's go on the next topic. The next topic is about the maps pool, and I think it will also touch on the like tactical mode, but I think we had that earlier, so scratch that. Let's see. Since the release of Dofus on Unity, many comments have come up concerning the combat maps. Some of you praise their legibility and coherence. Others regret the variety, the richness, or the link with the environments. So as a kind of a reminder, in Dofus 2, the map you fought in was the map that you were on in the role-playing mode. Like you walk around in the world, there's a tree to the left, there's a hole in the middle, you go across the hole, and then you start a fight. The tactical map of the fight will have the hole, will have the tree, will look the same. So it's, in terms of immersion, it looks like you're fighting on the map that you were just in. Since they reworked all the maps to create semi-tactical mode with elements of decor but still like a grid system, like chess, they couldn't rework the entirety of maps, so they made a small pool of maps for each area. So let's say Astrum Fields has a pool of, let's say, 5 to 7 maps, I don't know, and every time you fight on one of the, let's say, 50 maps that make up the Astrum Fields, then you get teleported to one of these maps at random. So this breaks the immersion a bit, but makes it that we are able to have a semi-tactical mode with elements of decor, and the game looks like a game and not just like a Excel spreadsheet. I'll leave this one to PvPers. Personally, yes, maps can be unclear with glyphs and traps, but not enough for me to care. So I don't think this is about clarity, because they did a dev blog about clarity. I think this is really about having a limited number of maps, but it goes hand in hand. But let's see what they're saying. Oh no, they're talking about tactical mode. At its origin, the tactical mode was not a glorious choice. It's the symptom of a deeper problem. The Dofus map became through the years more beautiful, more rich, but not legible enough for a tactical game that was more and more demanding. So at the start, basically, there was no tactical mode, but the maps were like, here is grass, and here's like maybe a shrine or whatever, but nothing that would block your sight. So when you started the fight, the map would stay the same, a grid would appear, and then you would fight on it. But then they started adding multiple layers, trees, more environments, caverns, and stuff like that. And so you can your character can kind of be hidden behind a pillar and you don't see anything. And at the same time, more stuff is happening, more glyphs, more enemy, more states, more color changes, more whatever. So they needed to strip all of that was not important for the fight. And that's where we got the tactical mode. A more legible mode was necessary, exactly, but we were already restricted by limited resources on the level design side. At the time, it would have been more pertinent to create dedicated combat arenas rather than convert the maps with automatic meshing. But this would have been costly and long. However, something needed to be done. In the last years of Dofus 2, it would be hypercritical to say that the game was playable without tactical mode, outside of very specific cases. So yeah, that's true. Everyone was playing in tactical mode. That's like, that was the default, basically. If the tactical mode allowed for perfect legibility, it also introduced 3 major flaws. Loss of immersion. So personally, I felt more the loss of immersion being transported in the same map, but with like just black background and gray tiles, than now having the beautiful decor around it that fits the theme of the area that you're in, but the map, like the tactical squares of the map, is not perfectly the same. This current semi-tactical mode is more immersive for me than the previous tactical mode. Degraded aesthetic. So yeah, especially if you look at streamers play the game from a non-player that wants to get into it, Dofus is already hard to get into. And now you start to look at some streamer or some YouTube videos and it looks bland because it looks like nothing, basically. Only the characters, and people were playing it even in creature mode. So it was just blobs moving and casting spells with no animations. Yeah. Systematic conservation of the exploration pattern in combat. Systematic conservation of the exploration pattern in combat. What does that mean? Systematic conservation. So I'm guessing what they mean by that is that if you want to make a beautiful map when you're exploring it outside of a fight, it doesn't necessarily translate well into a tactically interesting map. So, oh wow, this beautiful bridge looks super good. But then in a fight, it creates like a super long kind of bottleneck where you can just kill the monsters and block them, and it makes for like a super easy or abusable map. So that's what I'm thinking they mean by that. The bridge is beautiful, and now in Dofus 3.0 you can still have beautiful maps that don't really translate well into fighting maps, but when you start to fight on it, you get transferred into like a map with interesting obstacles, interesting areas, and that was designed for fighting. Yes, exactly. Okay. Perfect. First revamp was tried in 2017 with the hope of correcting at least partially the identified flaws. It consisted in categorizing tactical blocks depending on zone, integrating a little color and some decorative elements to break the uniformity. But this attempt did not suffice, neither in content nor form. So there was like already 2 types. Since 2017, there were 2 types of tactical, the actual grayscale one and the one with like a bit of color. But still, it was pretty ugly. The first 2 flaws, loss of immersion and degraded aesthetic, were barely mitigated. As for the third, the conservation of the exploration pattern in combat, it remained entirely intact. The structural restriction prevented the creation of truly varied maps. We constantly had to maintain an exploitable combat surface, avoid isolated zones, bottlenecks, and overly pronounced heights, at the risk of having to deactivate the combat system on those maps, which made them unusable for monsters, PvP, or quests. So you want to make a beautiful maps with heights and like small islands and whatever, then it becomes unusable for fighting on it. In other words, the more a map told a story, the less it could be played. Yes, exactly. Okay, Unity, a new opportunity. With the Unity port, one thing is certain. After the Valonia Archipelago update in 2022, the level design team found themselves waiting. Impossible to start the animation work without the client being stabilized. So they resuscitated an old dream. Finally create dedicated combat maps. The workload in a few numbers. Dofus has 12,000 exploration and dungeon maps. So instead of recreating all 12,000, they created more than 2,000 dedicated maps, including 600 dungeon maps, 300 specific quest maps, and 1,200 outside farm maps. So these were the map pools. These maps were built by hand with no automation. This took more than a year full-time for our level designer team. Is the work over? Certainly not. Okay, so now that they've done that for 3.0, here we had a recap of what happened. Let's see what they think of it and what they want to change. I'm surprised dungeon maps make up nearly a third of all maps. Yeah, because they had, like, in the past, it was 600 dungeon maps out of 12,000, so a very small percentage. But since the outside farm maps could be reduced significantly, but the dungeon maps couldn't, then now it makes a much higher percentage. Okay, the monotony of maps. 5 maps per pool. An assumed choice that dictated by the necessity to respect deadlines and to build on solid foundations. But this number quickly revealed itself insufficient. The impression of repetitiveness quickly appears, the same combat schematic reappear, and with them goes away the surprise, creativity, and strategic diversity. We also recognize that the offered maps were designed without taking any risks. A certain carefulness imposed itself in order to ensure a stable experience in this environment. But in the long run, it's impossible to introduce truly memorable maps, even voluntarily destabilizing ones in their functioning, if they become systematic. An overly specific map, if it comes back too often, will end up weakening the game rather than strengthening it. So if you have like this cool, let's use the bridge example again, this cool bridge that really favors like long range teams or whatever, if one every 5 fights you have this one, you get bored of it. Like you don't say, oh my god, what an amazing map, what a surprise. It loses its flavor and just becomes annoying, especially if you're a melee team, for instance. A larger pool would allow us to explore more forms, mechanic, and visual identities. And more importantly, to test bolder propositions without compromising the global balance. Okay, the end of fixed landmarks for farming. Some regret no longer be able to farm on fixed map, known and optimized. And this regret is legitimate. So here it's kind of two contradictory arguments. I haven't finished reading this one fully, but here people are saying it's too there's too much monotony. It's always the same. But here people were like, we liked it when it was exactly always the exact same map, because we could optimize like our positioning and optimize the placement of the monsters and stuff like that. So we have two opposite teams here. Here people say, oh, it's too repetitive, and here people saying we preferred when it was always the same exact map. Some adapted their gameplays or specific classes, but they also lead the creation of frozen routines. It was common to spend hours on the same map without moving, thinking, or adapting. A certain form of immobility that no longer corresponds to the game experience we want to encourage. Okay, so I like that. The new system invites movement, adaptation, and rediscovery. It writes itself in a logic already started by other revamps, the professions of progressions of the Dofus, where we valorize engagement, curiosity, and the diversity of approaches. So they want to go away from a team of like 7 Enus and 1 Craw, always farming on the same map with that same exact bridge, just spamming the same arrow. They want to move away from the grind, the mindless grind, and having people not know what map, like removing the up. Sorry, there's a fly. The removing the predictability of saying, okay, we know that it's always going to be the same map, allows for people to play the game more in line with what they want to do. Game is not designed for true random maps though, Cat's Eye, but the map is full CC, just won't work. It's a shame, but the game is designed around starting players and map as far apart as possible. Yeah, I think the goal of these new maps was to be, like they say, very cautious to not like break the game, but having the enemies and the players a bit closer, so that basically they want any team to be able to fight on any map. So there's obstacles for you to hide behind if you're a ranged team. There's space for you to go back and push the enemies, but the starting points are somewhat close, so that you can just rush in turn one if you're a melee team. Okay. Yeah, okay. The end of fixed landmarks, we were here. But they also lead to the creature. Yeah. This new system invites movement, adaptation, and rediscovery. It writes itself in a logic already started by other revamps. Oh yeah, I read that already. My bad. Today's still saw maps allow you to capitalize on your class or your game style, but they're not frozen. You now have to look for them in an ensemble, understand the dynamics unique to each zone. It's no longer the mastery of a unique map that is favored, but the analysis of an ensemble. And to accompany this transition, we will progressively enrich each pool with more categorized maps in order to reward this new form of learning. I like that thinking. The disappearance of gameplay exploits. The old maps sometimes allowed for abuses, notably in PvM, with exploitable bottlenecks. The famous bridge that I keep talking about. These strategies deleted all forms of danger and emptied combat of its sense. In a dungeon, an atypic map can enrich the approach, but in exterior farming, it unbalances everything and renders the rest of the area useless. This is not the type of game we want to protect. I agree with that. The impression of not being where the combat was started. Oh yes, this is a non-argument. This feeling can arise in certain quests or very defined environments, but perfect correspondence to the origin map is technically impossible. A lot of visual elements need to be deleted to allow combat. Central items, overflowing decors, important elevations, and the maps need to be reduced. All exteriors map are 28 cells by 40. Creating a playable version of each map would represent more than 11,000 new maps, which would be around 2 to 5 years of work even with automation. We preferred another path. To answer this problem, we are refining the map pools to make them more visually coherent with their environment. For example, new maps were added around the Astrub Lake to better fit its mood. We are also developing a system to allow to assign a fixed combat map to a precise quest without impacting classic fights. This means that if an NPC asks you to fight at the bottom of Gizgul Tower, you will really be there. Unpopular opinion, but this is part of the reason why Elio died. I'm gonna answer with a popular opinion that Ilio died because they killed it. But yeah, I think Ilio is still strong. Doesn't really hinder the potential of placing great portals. Maybe it's a bit harder, but I think it's still doable to really benefit from Ilio. Visual fatigue and animated decors. It's true that certain decors, especially when animated, can distract the attention of a player that's focusing on gameplay. This point was often brought up, and we hear you. However, this being a case of suspected visual fatigue due to the absence of a black background, available studies are nuanced. The dark mode, largely adopted by modern applications, is not necessarily more calming for the eyes. It all depends on usage, context, and the brightness of the screen. Hello, Gizm. In such a blur, the best answer remains flexibility, offering options and let everyone adapt to their own visual comfort. We already explored many approaches in this sense. Gray or black filter at the edges of maps, partial desaturation, study of accessibility standards in other games, notably to answer needs related to color blindness and other visual specificities. But let's be transparent. Going further would require intervention on the client side, and since the 3.0, this team is strongly mobilized on other essential priorities. This work is thus temporarily paused. This does not mean it's abandoned. The will to answer it is there, and we will start back on this workload as soon as conditions allow. So this is not really affecting me. I don't really care that they're pausing it. I'm happy that they're focusing on bugs and other more urgent matters. But I understand, like, people with color blindness, not having color blindness options is kind of shitty, especially if it was there. I don't know if it was there, but especially if like the grayscale tactical mode of old allowed for better legibility. Okay, let's see. Especially in 2025, yeah, exactly. Tactical mode and combat maps. Why not both? From a strictly visual standpoint, these two options could coexist. However, the mapped pool system cannot be deactivated. And more importantly, the tactical mode as it existed before 3.0 is no longer integrated in the Unity client. It was a purely client code that was not reconstructed in the new architecture. We understand the arguments. Better legibility, less visual distractions. These are legitimate needs to which we try to bring answers through other means. Filters, visual improvements, progressive adjustments. However, we wish you clearly say it. To clearly say it. We would be sincerely sad to see the disappearance of the aesthetic improvement on combat maps. The visual immersion is now an integral part of the experience. With that being said, a deeper obstacle appears. We are currently developing combat mechanic and visual effects that are directly based on the decor of these maps. Without them, certain key effects would disappear, making combats unplayable in tactical mode. Ooh, spoilers. You will discover a first preview in an epic combat of the 3.2. It's still a sketch, but it opens the way for a larger revamp of combat feedback. Spell effects, glyph environment. So we will have indicators of what's happening in the fight displayed as part of the decor in 3.2, which is the Ozamadas dimension. And removing the aesthetic and putting back just a black background would remove this information. So that's like one more reason why they don't want to go back to the Dofus 2 tactical mode. However, this evolution is incompatible with the old tactical mode. Reconstructing it to then need to remove a few months after would make no sense. We prefer to go forward, build modern tools that are durable and adaptable, and end up to par with the combats we want to offer in the future. Reasonable. As long as they have accessibility options, I don't think removing the backgrounds of the maps and going back to the old tactical mode is something that we want. In conclusion, your feedback is varied. Some praise the effort made, others regret the old system. Rather than going backwards, we made the choice to improve this new model by making it richer, more varied, and more pleasant to play. This goes through the increase of maps pools, a better configuration diversity, the addition of specific maps for certain quests, and if possible, some adjustments to limit visual fatigue and distractions. This topic will be actively handled during the second part of the year, but beyond improvements to come, it will remain a background work site for the team. So I think this is a reasonable conclusion. In terms of visual fatigue and distractions, I remember playing during the beta and the Fudala dungeon, Funoroshi, like everything was shaking in the map during the fights, and now when you go there, everything is moving much slower. Like when you're in the map and in the factory of fireworks, everything is moving really fast, and when you start a fight, all of the animations were slowed. So it really helps, because otherwise it was pretty epileptic to do the whole fight with having the whole map shake. Angel stays on Ankama's neck. I love her energy on the forums. Let's see what she say. It is beyond my comprehension that Wakfu drop a new tactical mode in the latest beta and have had more visually appealing variation of tactical mode for almost as long as the game has been out. And yet for Dofus, none of these ideas seem to be utilized, let alone considered. As far as visual fatigue goes, if you only just loaded the game up and start a fight and a flashing sprite goes across your screen, more often than not, you're automatically gonna flick your focus to that instead of the playing field. Simple test with eye tracking software in conjunction with webcams could prove this fact. But when does that happen? Like, aren't you going to ignore a player in the far corner of a map shooting off their sparkles when you're concentrating on the game? Same goes for animated elements surrounding the map. In a dungeon map where there are specific mechanics needed to trigger certain states, you aren't going to strictly focus on one enemy alone, you are looking all over the map. I don't get what she's trying to say here. Majority of players who mourn the loss of tactical mode are asking for it back, and that is it. That is all you will ever see. Most of us like the new maps, but they're too bright and distracting. We aren't necessarily asking for the black background. We're asking for a dimmable background, different color options for the playing field to accommodate all type of vision capabilities, and the option to turn off floating sprites. Please just introduce a tactical mode that reduces visual noise as much as possible. So people are like trying to fight this super hard fight, and then there's like a leaf floating on their screen, and they're like, squirrel! And it's distracting them, I guess. That's the conclusion of this. We went around the houses, but I think I kind of do agree in part with her suggestion. Yeah, maybe it's because it's not affecting me that I think it's useless, but I can kind of understand. I don't think it's a big priority. Okay, let's see the last topic, which is PvP 5v5. So as you know, I'm not a big PvP guy, so we're gonna go really fast through that. I don't think I will have a lot of things to add or an opinion on anything, but let's see what they have to say. Brought up in a previous top 3, the PvP 5v5 format continues to rouse interest. Many of you appreciate this type of confrontation and wish to see it improved to make it more attractive. In this perspective, the question of multi-accounting often comes up, dividing opinions among the community. Do we know any 5v5 experts we can ask at all about this? I don't. Like, I used to play in guilds with a 5v5 people before, but currently I don't know anyone I could ask. Anyway, to this day, 5v5 finds its place mainly in the alliance mechanics through prisms, attacks, and perceptors. It's voluntarily absent for the Colosseum, since we favor in this competitive format shorter and more dynamic fights. Adding a 5v5 format would also imply multiplying queues, which would scatter players and lengthen wait times. We remember what happened with 2v2. With that being said, we are not fully excluding the idea of a 5v5 format in Colosseum, but this would take the form of a temporary and fun event without trying to insert itself permanently in the currently existing competitive formats. So maybe a special game mode that has 5v5 and that lasts for 1 month. People can play it, discover it, and then if they like it, then they're gonna play more when it comes back. So it would guarantee like having a lot of players. An ongoing evolution of the alliance system. In our previous answer regarding alliances, we expressed our desire to rework this system in the longer term. The objective is to think of a wild, reimagined PvP capable of relighting interest about 5v5. While waiting for this revamp, we want to offer a temporary solution starting in September, aiming to address the main problems encountered today. Okay, so this is alliance stuff. A new neutral prism for recycling. So that's what I suggested. That's what I was talking about. A neutral prism will be available at the Alliance Temple. It will allow the recycling of resources, but without applying bonuses linked to the territories or adjacent territories. Simpler, I like that. Only certain resources will be recyclable through this prism. Dungeon Guardian resources and crafted items. The recycling rate will be 60% for the player and 40% for the prism. The prism won't be attackable. What? Why is it 40% for the prism if no one can get it? I guess it's to not have 100% for the player. Basically, it's just to say like you will get 60% of the nuggets of any resource that you recycle there. But it's a weird way to phrase it. Current prisms remain necessary to territory capture and now have an integrated teleportation system. However, they won't allow the recycling of resources anymore. The notion of durability disappears. Now a prism will only be destructible through a direct attack. Its destruction will always trigger a King of the Hill, with a 30-minute delay to its effective triggering. This delay is accompanied by a message set to the Alliance channel to alert all the members wishing to participate in the territory capture. Alliance modules and recyclers won't be craftable anymore, but they will be recyclable. The city centers of large cities won't be captured. Okay, so Alliance modules and recyclers, you won't be able to use them. So there's no reason to craft them, but the existing one will be able to be recycled. The city centers of large cities won't be capturable anymore. Finally, multi-accounting will now be authorized for these mechanics exclusively on dedicated servers. Yeah, okay, so multi-accounting servers will allow multi-accounting AVAs? Okay. Adjustments on King of the Hill. The global functioning of King of the Hill remain unchanged in terms of role and points gained. When a prism is placed on a neutral territory, no King of the Hill is declared, the capture is direct. The duration of King of the Hill is however reduced, going from 30 to 20 minutes. Okay, so a faster King of the Hill. Revision of the functioning of perceptors. New possibilities are open when harvesting a perceptor. The player can choose to retrieve the resources or directly convert them to nuggets. Okay. In both cases, the old bonuses linked to territories and adjacent territories are applied. When a perceptor is defeated, each member of the victorious team is offered the same choice. Yeah, nuggies for everyone. Okay, so wait, I'm gonna finish reading and then I'm gonna try to do a recap. The multi-accounting is also authorized here, but still limited to adapted servers. Additional rules are placed to limit abused behaviors, notably alliance harassment. Wait. When a character destroys a perceptor, it cannot attack another belonging to the same alliance for a duration of 2 hours. Ooh, okay, interesting. Whoa, that was a lot of changes. I don't know a lot about 5v5, but let me try to recap about alliances. So recycling is gonna happen at the Alliance Temple. It's gonna be a neutral prism. And you will lose 40% of the values of the items in nuggets. So if you have, and you will only be able to recycle crafted items and dungeon guardian resources. So if you have, I don't know, a normal monster resource, you need to craft it into an item and then recycle it. The other way to generate nuggets, so this is the way to generate nuggets is going to be this. You take your resources, you craft them into items, and then you recycle them in the new neutral prism in Sophokia. Alliances will still be able to capture territories with the same system, King of the Hill, but this will only be useful for the bonuses that owning an area gives. So I think when your alliances own an area, you gain more XP and loot in there. And this applies to your perceptors as well. Because I'm pretty sure you can place perceptors in areas that you don't own. So anyone in an alliance can participate in King of the Hills to control the territories that will now only give bonuses. So no more nuggets related to King of the Hill. And now the nuggets will either be from perceptors. Perceptors will be able to generate nuggets. Fighting perceptors, if you kill a perceptor, you can steal their nuggets. And recycling crafted items at the neutral prism. What it doesn't say is, are the resources from the perceptors transformed into nuggets at a 100% rate? If this is the case, then it will almost always be beneficial to transfer them. I think this should, like, I'm not an expert, but this should see an increase in the value of nuggets, I think. And I'm very curious to see, are people gonna actually play King of the Hill if the reward is super lowered? Like King of the Hill, yes, it's fine, you own the area, but most of the time it was to like recycle and generate nuggets, and people like normal members of the alliance, those that weren't like the head of the alliance, usually were convinced to go to the AVA by saying, in my limited experience, these people were convinced saying, hey, there's like 10 billion nuggets on this prism, help us defend it. But now if there's no nuggets to the key, why would I go lose 20 minutes on a King of the Hill, losing fights or whatever, or just chilling on the beach, if I could do something else during this 20 minutes and I don't have any nuggets at the key? So I'm curious to see what the impact is in terms of ownership. Will the Alliance just abandon the idea of controlling territory? We'll have to see. I'm hydrating. Thank you, Abigail. Okay, open questions to the community. Certain decisions remain to be taken, and we want to include you in our thought process. 2 major questions are being studied today. Should we forbid the placement of perceptors in dungeons? Should we delete the Book of Perceptors? I have no opinion on this, but if you do, make sure you make your voice heard and go comment here like Gluto. Well done, Gluto. He said it would be awesome to allow for webhooks to be set up so that alliances can be notified of attacks outside of the game. This is the most Gluto thing I've ever read. But yes, it would be cool if like your prism get attacked and then a Discord bot was listening to the webhook and then posts a message and saying, everyone, log into the game, we need to defend our prism. Because it has 0 nuggets in it, because they don't have nuggets in them. I don't know. Alright. Okay, so that was it for this week. And you might have seen, but there is not going to be a next episode. There's not going to be an episode of a next episode of Twelvian News. Here's what Ankama said. Hello everyone, since the open letter started shared this April 25th, we brought an answer to your biggest concerns via the weekly top 3. 25 topics were offered, each handling a different topic. The goal of this top 3 was to identify your concerns for a week and then answer them in the following week. Like many of you have shared, this format is currently less relevant, and we agree with you. That means, good job, it worked. If people are saying these topics are not relevant, while also not saying you missed this very obvious topic, that means that they covered every relevant topic, and I kind of agree with that. So it's for this reason that we are thinking of reworking this format for the month of July. We will come back to you next week to share all the top 3 topics again and talk about what's next. Okay, so it's maybe not the last episode, but there's going to be a format change. That said, a last announcement before ending this week's episode is there's going to be a live maintenance in the morning, Osamadas in the afternoon. Double AnkamaLive next Tuesday. One day, 2 Twitch meetings. We start by opening the backstage of the maintenance of the Dofus servers, and we follow up with the presentation of update 3.2. Mark your calendar, it's going to be a busy day. So they previously did live to talk about bugs, and they used that live to present us the tool, the bug tracker tool. So the reception of this live was great. People liked it. So they're doing, again, an early morning live during the maintenance. So they're closing the servers, and while they do, they bring people and they talk about it. So everyone that is not playing Dofus can still do Dofus stuff and watch the live. So that one will be at 8:30 a.m. After the success of the previous session, Riebeck comes back, this time accompanied by Sek, tester coordinator, and Koto, client developer, to make you experience the inner workings of the weekly maintenance. So more transparency. On the schedule, complete tour of the day's maintenance and the fixes applied. Zoom on the bugs and improvements list. Where are we at? What are the next steps? Why are certain bugs so persistent? Our testing methods, the analysis of the logs, and the hunt for regressions. And then consultation of the priority bug lists and answering your question as long as the servers are offline. Okay, so this is going to be kind of more technical, AnkamaLive. Would not want to be Koto in that live. Hope it doesn't read the chat. Yeah, there's going to be... There might be some flaming there. And then, the one that's more interesting, the presentation of update 3.2 at 3 p.m. Prepare your whips and sharpen your teeth. The Great Conjurer slightly opens the doors to its domain in 2 acts, just enough to reveal the spirit of this new adventure. Act 1, the Osamadas Divine Dimension, with Riebeck, once again, associate producer, and Nelin, lead game designers, Yola, game designer, and Mazu, level designer. You will discover a tour of the 5th Dopus Divine Dimension and its creatures, a gameplay focus with the presentation of Gargan Diaz, the first Dopus Titan, a questions and answers session to close off this first section. And then the Act 2 will be about the Osamadas class revamp. Riebeck, once again, what can't he do? Will be with Crocus, game designer, and Matt Gap, animator, for a complete look at the metamorphosis of the Osamadas class. So they will present what the general philosophy and revamp goals, new spell animations, expected impact, and your summoning strategies. And then a Q&A session. 2 dev blogs dedicated to this update will then be published on our website. Between technical backstage and preview of the next update, Tuesday is gearing up to be a concentrate of Dopus news that you won't want to miss. See you on July 1st on our AnkamaLive Twitch channel. Please note both AnkamaLives will be presented in French, but Istos will be translating them live, blah blah blah. No, joke aside, I think I will be translating the one in the afternoon for sure. The one in the morning I will be sleeping. If people ask me, I can do a translation, a delayed translation, but I don't think it's going to be that relevant to do so. Just reading the dev blog afterwards will be enough, I think.